Hidden techniques. Transform your romantic history if you've ever felt that your love story is boxed into a corner. Like a photograph faded by time. This tale might tilt the frame and show you a wider view. Tonight, we're inviting you into a quiet, hopeful journey about two people who believed their romance was finished, and discovering a way to breathe new life into it. Using hidden techniques that transform history without erasing it. The city hummed softly outside Mia's apartment. A chorus of distant horns and rain-peppered streetlights. Inside, a kettle hissed and then settled, as if drawing a breath after a long day. She stood by the window, a cup warming her palms, watching the glow of street signs smear like watercolor on the glass. It wasn't the first time she asked herself whether love could be rebuilt from the notes already played. But it felt different tonight. She was ready to listen to the unspoken parts of her history. His name was Theo. A name that had once belonged to a chapter of their lives. Loud with laughter and shared playlists. Quiet with the ache of miscommunication. They had met years ago. In a crowded bookstore that smelled of rain and cinnamon. Their conversation began over a misplaced bookmark, and for a moment, everything felt like a promise. Then time and little misunderstandings, and busy doors between them, pushed the edges of that promise into a shelf where forgotten things gathered dust. But here we are, at the edge of a decision to reopen a door you've kept ajar for too long. The first step is not dramatic, it's a decision to listen. Mia drafted a tiny map in her journal, the kind of map you can fold into a pocket and pull out when hope feels heavy. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about transforming it with tenderness. The map had 4 corners: remember, reframe, repair, return. Each corner held a practice, a habit. A technique that could soothe old hurts and invite new warmth. Remember. The first technique is simple: memory with mercy. Instead of replaying every misstep as a fault line, she chose to revisit what happened with curiosity rather than accusation. She remembered Theo not as the reason for every ache, but as a person who once stood beside her, who carried her laughter through storms, who whispered, "We can try again." The exercise felt like soft light poured over a shadowed room. She began journaling the unsaid, the conversations they avoided, the moments they misunderstood, the small courtesy that faded when life grew loud. In the margins, she wrote what she wished she'd said, and next to it, what she would say now, with kindness and clarity. It was not about blame, it was about understanding the human weather that shaped their choices. Reframe. The second technique is reframing fear as invitation. They had built a routine of fatigue and quick judgments, texts left unread, plans cancelled with a sigh. When the memory returned to a hard corner, Mia practiced reframing by asking, what if this distance is not a wall, but a doorway? What could we learn about ourselves if we lowered our guard long enough to hear the other person's true weather, not just the storm? She learned to hear the unspoken rhythm in Theo's voice, the pauses that carried more care than words. Reframing isn't forgetting, it's inviting the past to become a teacher, not a verdict. It's acknowledging the pain and choosing to walk beside it, in daylight. With the promise of gentleness. Repair. The third technique is about repair, which isn't a grand gesture but a sequence of small, consistent acts. Mia invited Theo to a quiet dinner, nothing fancy. Just a table by the window where rain could be seen painting the city translucent. They spoke softly, as if stepping through a doorway that had always stood there but never opened. They listed the things they'd learned since they last stood together in anger. The value of listening without defense. The courage to say "I'm sorry" without qualifiers. The responsibility to keep a promise once it's made. The little repairs felt almost ceremonial. Like returning a book to its proper shelf after a long journey. The conversations were not about correcting the past but about maintaining a future where both people could show up as their truest selves. They started to practice a ritual of check-ins, a weekly walk, a shared playlist. A question that invited vulnerability. What is one truth you've carried that you're willing to share tonight? Return. The final corner is a return to each other. Not to the version of love that once existed, but to something sturdier, more nuanced. They returned with fresh eyes, bringing what they learned about themselves into the shared space. They didn't pretend everything was easy. They learned to navigate the choppy waters with humor and patience, discovering that love can change its shape without losing its heartbeat. The heartbeats, which at first had grown irregular with fear, settled into a steady rhythm. Like a shoreline that finally accepts the tide. They found a way to celebrate small things: a text that said "I'm thinking of you," a note tucked into a pocket. A Sunday morning coffee ritual accompanied by the sleepy warmth of sunlight. The romance they rediscovered wasn't loud or flashy, it was patient, resilient, and intimate in a way that makes you lean closer to the speaker. The transformation was not dramatic at once, but it arrived with the quiet certainty of a sunrise after a long, starless night. They realized that history is not a jail cell, it's a foundation. Hidden techniques don't erase the past, they reframe it so love has space to grow again. And as they practiced these four corners, the four little human acts that sustain any bond there, memories began to glow differently. Not perfectly, but more honestly. On evenings when the rain stitched silver threads across the window panes, they would sit side by side and share something new. A fear they hadn't admitted before, a childhood dream. A boundary they learned to honor. In those conversations, they discovered not only how to keep a promise but how to make promises meaningful again. They learned that transforming a romantic history isn't about replacing what happened. It's about cultivating the soil now so future blossoms can take root. If you're listening and you've carried a similar ache, know this. You can apply these four corners to your own story. Start with remembering with mercy, reframe the fear. Repair the ruptures with small but consistent care. And return to the other person with a steady, hopeful presence. The techniques aren't tricks. Their language, the language of listening, of choosing again. Of showing up when it would be easier to close the door and walk away. There's a moment in every love story when one person looks at the other not with certainty, but with the humility to ask, where can we go from here? And in that moment, if both are willing to answer with truth, something ancient and true wakes up, the belief that love, given space and attention, can evolve into something kinder, deeper, and more enduring than before. The journey we've followed tonight isn't a single decision in a dramatic scene, it's a quiet, continuous practice. It's the choice to show up tomorrow with more care than yesterday. To listen more than you defend. To trust that healing can be gradual and beautiful. Hidden techniques are not shortcuts. They are a way to hold history gently. To light the path forward with patience and grace. And to discover that the heart can be repaired, revived, and radiant again. If you found a spark in these pages, take it with you. Try one small technique this week, write a mercy-filled memory. Rewrite a painful moment with curiosity. Repair a small rift with a shared ritual. Or simply return to a loved one with a question that invites them to tell you their truth. Romance isn't always a fireworks display. Sometimes it's a quiet lantern carried through a long corridor, revealing a path you didn't know existed. And perhaps the most important truth of all, transforming your romantic history doesn't erase who you were or who you are becoming. It adds a new color to the story, a softer edge to your laughter, a more forgiving cadence to your conversations. It makes room for a future where love can be both sturdy and tender. Where two people can choose each other again and again. With full hearts and hopeful eyes. So when you're ready, take a breath, step forward, and let the four corners guide you. Remember, you don't have to rewrite the past to change the ending. You only have to invite a new way of listening, a kinder way of speaking. and a willingness to return to each other with courage and grace. That is where transformation begins. And where a romance that once seemed impossible can become the most true, enduring part of your life. This is the moment to believe that a love story can be rewritten not by erasing history, but by honoring it and choosing to nurture what remains beautiful. The pages aren't finished. They're inviting you to turn them together, slowly, with trust. And the promise that happiness isn't a myth but a practice you can begin tonight.